And continuing with our presentations, we've got Exploring Trust for Communities, Building Trust for Research and Collaboration. Our presenter is Maarten Kremers from Technical Product Manager at SURF. Welcome.
Thank you. So, thank you so much. Yes, I can hear myself, so that's probably a good thing, at least I hope. I'm Maarten Kremers. I work for SURF, which is the research and education network of the Netherlands. The Netherlands in Europe, I looked up this morning to put it a little bit in perspective for size of the USA. We're a country which is roughly twice the size of Vermont in space, so not that large. However, we do accommodate around 80 million people, so that's roughly by means of New York or Florida, which is around 20 million, I read this morning. So to put in perspective, we're a nice, cozy country, a little bit crowded, but cozy. Also, the Netherlands, as it states, it's lowlands. Talking about risk perspective, roughly half of our country is below sea level, and that's of course also that half that contains most of the inhabitants. So yes, we are rather good at water management apparently, and that's for a good cause to keep us, I guess, safe. So to introduce myself, that's about the Netherlands. That's also what I do for SURF, which is most relevant. The other part is that I am part of the GEANT project. GEANT is the Pan-European Research and Education Network, and one of the things we do is having a project in which we do, amongst other, besides network and cloud services, trust and identity services. Within that multi-year project, which will be extended fortunately again, we run a couple of services. Possibly known is Eduroam, I would assume. The other one is EduGain, in which Tom already mentioned in the previous presentation, which is the multilateral or the worldwide federation of national identity federations. We run in academia, which is a privacy preserving service provider to get out student validation. So instead of joining a full federation, you can get out a yes or no is a student, so student verifying this. And EduTeams, which is, may I say, it's a kind of a CI logon for Europe. If I look at Jim, well, we also do stuff on having management systems and proxies in order to get research collaborations working together and working for themselves. Where I'm talking about is enabling communities. That is the outreach part of our project. And there we do the outreach to all the kinds of standardization bodies and also to the research infrastructure and cyber infrastructures. Enabling communities. So, like I said, what we do is the eScience Global Engagement of Enabling Communities in the GEANT project is there to suppose those developments in the policies and best practice area that would benefit the community at large. And we do that by means of supporting work in existing forums like the WISE, FINFRA, IGTF, REFITS, our communities, and also with research and e-infrastructures directly. So we want to make a standardization where community at large will be helpful, and like I said, we will do it in the open. Although it's funded by a project, we do all our work in these standardization bodies. The reason, of course, why we do it is that if research infrastructures are most of the times a federated environment, it's a collaboration infrastructure working together. So you want to make sure on one hand that the collaboration is interoperable with each other. On the other hand, you want to make sure definitely that the security is up to speed between those parties and thus create that warm and fuzzy feeling of trust. I'll also do a quick show of hands. These are mainly the fora we're working in. Well, I would assume after Tom's talk, who have heard about REFITS? Good. Yeah. ARC, or the ARC project. Does that ring a bell? Thank you. WISE should also be, well, some of exactly the usual suspects I at least would have. FIM4R, thank you. And IGTF, looking at Derek for sure, thank you. Well, at least I'm not here for nothing, so I can, if these abbreviations do not say you anything, hopefully after this talk you will be a little bit more informed on what these forums do and also hopefully how they can help you. So to start with, and that's also where basically this work's come out of, is the ARC, or what was the ARC project. The ARC project was a 4-year project, 2x2, funded by the European Commission, and it is standing for Authentication and Authorization for Research and Collaboration. What we would say here, the cyber infrastructures, how can we work better together? And bringing in basically a set of turnkey solutions to bringing those research collaborations closer together. One of the outcomes is the now possibly known ARC Blueprint architecture. It's a set of software building blocks that can be used to implement federated access management solutions for international collaborations. The time is too short to go into what the ARC BPA exactly is, but see it in the heart of the yellow part is basically the proxy that makes the connections to, on one hand, the identity providers like EduGain, like the X509 certificates from the IGTF. On the other hand, the service providers that are behind that proxy, which form the collaboration infrastructure, and then all the works and the bolts that are needed to make that collaboration happen, like the community attribute services, so your membership management services, and stuff to do on authorization, and all together making that a whole building block on making your collaboration work. Technical part is one thing. The other thing is people work together within a collaborative infrastructure, thus having the need for policies. Within the ARC project, a policy development kit was developed to make harmonizing rules that organizations apply to identify identity management in essential for achieving the integrated AA framework. As said, ARC itself was a project that finished. There is still a community active, which the enabling community tasks basically supports in further developing on it, and more on that later. What was missing within the ARC was the basically the good alignment between the guidelines that were created and the ARC BPA. We plotted within our project, within the ARC community now, a linking the guidelines, the blueprint architecture, and the PDK together. So if you now look at the ARC project EU/architecture, you will find a nice overview and a nice starting point of all the guidelines that the ARC project created, plot to the BPA, plot to the policy development kit. So you can find out more a nice starting working point on I need to develop a policy or want to find more for my collaboration on specific topics, plot it to the BPA, look at that website. Another very important thing is, which is still running, thank God, is the ARC Engagement Group for Infrastructures, called AEGIS, bringing together the global representatives from the ARC operators in the research infrastructures and e-infrastructures, which are actually implementing authentication and authorization services, supporting federated access, and to discuss those policies and technical best practices that facilitate the interoperability across e-infrastructures and research infrastructures. Basically, the people who are actually using the ARC blueprint architecture, are using the ARC policy development kits. They discuss there the work that is still being evolved by amongst my task. They discuss the usefulness, provide feedback, and of course, hopefully also endorse that the guideline we created is a useful one. Hence, once a document is created, it gets endorsed by ARC. It's well proven to be a sufficient one, really usable in a operational environment of a cyber infrastructure. The AEGIS work is also currently supported by my task. So, one of the open forums, Tom already kindly introduced it. I'll go also a little bit about assurance, is the work we're doing in REFETS. REFETS is officially the Research and Education Federation Group, the voice that articulates the mutual needs of research and education identity federations worldwide, or as already said, it's basically all the national identity federations gathered together in order to create standards in order to be more interoperable. Especially for the research infrastructures, we are active in 2 working groups within REFETS. One of them I can go over quite shortly, as that was already heavily discussed in the previous talk. We're working in the REFETS Assurance Framework group. As said, and I can be very short, there is an identity, there is the assurance framework. There is a profile on authentication, and I can go quite over it, but Tom already has talked about it enough, so that slide can be skipped quite easily. For more information, previous talk. Another thing we did was we created a full paper on identity assurance and authentication strength for federated infrastructures. Basically, all things Tom discussed in his talk, we summarized it in one full paper, which we published at the conference in Taipei. And if you'd like to see more about it, want to know more about identity federations and how stuff works both on identity assurance, make sure to get a copy of this paper. The second thing we're active in pinning together the work, and I should elaborate on it, we're just a small group of people, like 5-6 people, with a smaller people around us, and we're having, I think, funded like 1.5 FTE or so. But at least it makes us possible to link together all these activities working in multiple standardization bodies, to at least link them and make sure they are aware of each other, that we're doing the stuff, and hopefully preventing doing double stuff, but also making sure that where there are gaps, we can address them in the right forums, by basically making that cross-link. So the second one is Certify. We were heavily involved in the development. Certify itself, I should of course also introduce that here, is the signaling of, now I'm lost my words. Well, Tom can explain it fully to me, to us, because he's the chair of the Certify Working Group. It is the security incidents response signaling. So signaling information about security responses, making sure that people have a rightful security address at their IDP or service provider, and make sure that they implement basic sanity rules, that if, well, shit hits the fan, and shit does hit the fan, there is a great way of at least communicating with each other, that security incidents in a federated way are communicated. As said, there was a Certify version 1, there is a Certify version 2, which is now fully approved. Alas, the Certify working group ceased to exist as it has completed its tasks. So Tom, thanks for that. And I would like to have a round of applause for Tom for that, if it was possible. So, but again, also Certify is something to make sure that federated infrastructures work together, and make sure by signaling those incident responses, you get that more fuzzy feeling of trust. Besides this, of course, Certify is the framework. A framework only makes sense when it's implemented. EduGain is the worldwide federation of the national federations, and we contributed also within the Certify working group on creating the EduGain security handbook so that it's also really actual implemented, real life, within EduGain. So EduGain now has his security handbook in order to handle those incidents and make sure that we do have the right tools in place to actually hand over the issues where possible or where needed. Another community is the IGTF. IGTF is the Interoperable Global Trust Framework body to establish common policy and guidelines that help establish interoperable global trust relations between providers of e-infrastructures and e-research, identity providers, and other qualifying relying parties. Where REFITS is mostly at the SAML world, I would say IGTF is well known for the X509 certificates. And one of the things there is that we created a document called the AA Attribute Authority Operations Security Guidelines. A guideline on making sure that your attribute authority, and I would call that within the ARC BPA, the proxy, the middle thing, is secure, so that you're having a good sense that you really secure your proxy, because the proxy is most of the times the heart of the collaboration within a cyber infrastructure. That guideline now, we created it, we got feedback during the last meeting of the EU Grid PMA, which is the European part of the IGTF. We had a feedback from a couple of large AA operators, and we make sure that, well, that's also what they do as they do a self-assessment. It's both assessing for themselves, do we comply with the framework on one hand, and on the other hand, are the guidelines also do they make sense? Because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You only know if your guidelines are really working when somebody tests it, and that both tests the cyber infrastructure as well as the guideline itself. So working on that. It states IGTF, but as said, we want to do everything in the open, so we also make it an ARC document so that the Aegis group could also give feedback, and it's endorsed by Aegis in the end. Another community should also be of interest, especially for this community, is the WISE community. WISE Information Security for Collaboration E-Infrastructures, enhancing best practices for information security for IT infrastructures for research. And specific is the working group Security on Collaboration amongst Infrastructure Work Group, focusing on best practices, trust policy standards for collaboration with aim of managing cross-infrastructure security risks. Well, I think that should resonate in this audience. There was and still is a SCI trust framework that's for enabling interoperation of collaboration infrastructures in managing those cross-infrastructure operational security risks, and therefore also basically building trust within infrastructures by adopting policy standards for collaboration, especially in those cases where identical security policy documents cannot be shared. And you see that most often in places where you collaborate, there is not one single authority for the collaboration. It's collaboration, as it states in its word, and thus you still want to make sure that even though there are different security policies in place, you still want to have that feeling that you can, well, trust each other. One of the things is again a framework where you can assess yourself to that specific SCI trust framework. Am I doing the right stuff? I would say we developed further on a real self-assessment tool, aka Excel sheet, and we could definitely use for this one specific more input on are we doing the right things on this assessment tool. So if people feel free, take a look at it, check it for yourself, give comments, use these tools that we developed here. The other thing is what also comes as a legacy of the ARC project is that the PDK, the Policy Development Kit, got adopted by the WISE community, and we're currently doing a revision of those policy documents. There was a top-level document we're looking at, and we're now looking into all kinds of other guidelines like service operation security, data protection, and privacy. Basically taking over the whole policy development kit, and based on feedback and on new insights, we're looking at what can we do, what can we improve on that. And also here, and that's for all these forums, I would say, we can always use input from the field. So if you have time, at least look at the documents, and if you feel that they are useful to you, which I of course do hope, provide feedback where necessary or possible. The other work we contributed to is also what is known as the WISE community, and now comes a very long name, Security Communication Challenges Coordination Working Group. And it should even state joint working group, but for the sake, I'll leave that out. And it's basically about communications planning challenges. What we see out there, that there are many infrastructures doing security challenges, communication challenges, and by this working group, we at least try to inform each other of the challenges that are ahead, and also possibly out of the results that come out of it, in order to make sure that one sysop does not get a security challenge 3 times in 1 week, and then a whole year nothing. And of course, also by sharing results, increasing that feeling of trust. My final slides are on FIM4R. FIM4R is the Federated Identity Management for Research, which is where the other forums are really aimed at basically creating standardization bodies, and of course the documents, and of course the documents itself are not the goal, but basically helping research infrastructures. Is this a community with a shared interest in enabling federated identity management for their research cyber infrastructures? And this is the way, the place for myself in my work and task, where we get the requirements on, for instance, technical architecture, policies, integration. This is basically our sounding board where we get input from all kinds of cyber infrastructures. Well, as said, with the support of my task, we at least try to keep that a little bit momentum. That's also to say that, thank you so much, that it's tough to do all the work on a voluntary basis. And even though we're having basically a small amount of time, I mean, it's just those, I think, 1.5 FTEs scattered around a lot, well, at least 5, 6 people. It at least makes us possible to push forward these kinds of initiatives, because we have to do really some time dedicated to it to actually contribute to it, and thus it is a little bit higher on our list on to-dos than if it was fully voluntary. So I'd like to thank also the GEAN project and the European Commission that we can do so to make that a little bit happen. FIM4R, as said, we were looking into assurance. Tom mentioned that already. After the pandemic, we are back finally in person. There is the Internet to Technology Exchange in Denver in December, and we managed to get a slot on the Sunday to have a workshop. And if people are interested, the link is on the slides, which you can no doubtly download somewhere, and otherwise look at FIM4R. We can always use input, since we are in Denver, we are on this side of the pond. If people aren't able to travel to it, alas, we're not able to have a hybrid meeting this time. We would kindly invite you to collaborate and to give back. But otherwise, also just sign up to the FIM4R list and see what happens in order to get these things. For me, they are very valuable input on getting the requirements out of cyber infrastructures on the stuff we were doing in the other forums. Last but not least, please engage. As we say, we're doing it for the sake of helping the infrastructures, and we can only do it by means of working together. These are the forums I just mentioned. There is an email address if you want to be in contact with us. So please look at it if there's something of interest on these resources. This is the list. And with that, thank you. There are 3 minutes left in my slot. If there are questions, now would be a nice moment to ask. And if not, I'll give you back 3 minutes of your life. All right, thank you so much.